I'm sure you understand that the refugee crisis in Europe is consuming the attention of organizations like the IRC. It's a refugee crisis not just in Europe, but obviously in the Middle East, where we have extensive operations as well. I'm really sorry that the fact that I'm having to travel to Lesbos to meet refugees and talk to our amazing staff means that I can't speak to you live today. However, I very much did want to record this video before I left New York, because it's been the history of the humanitarian sector for the urgent emergency to drive out the important strategy. And the work that the high-level panel on cash transfers has done more than qualifies as important strategic work. I've read the report and I think it's really excellent. I think it's excellent and timely. And I think going forward, it's really important we understand not just why it's excellent, but why it's timely. The truth is that with 20 million refugees, 40 million IDPs fleeing conflict and disaster, fundamental questions are being raised about not just the capacity of the humanitarian sector, but the direction and organization of the humanitarian sector. Personally, I think it's incredibly important and positive that those questions are being asked, because it's not just that there are more refugees and IDPs than ever before, not just old wars that are continuing and new wars starting. It's also the case that the conditions in which refugees and IDPs are living and the conditions in which humanitarians are working are changing very fast, changing from camp settings to urban settings, changing from short-term displacement to very long-term displacement. All of the changes, in my view, speak to two things. One is the fact that we need as humanitarians to balance the traditional social interventions that we've done with much more effective economic interventions. And secondly, they point to the fact that cash distribution is a simple, powerful, empowering, effective way of making a real difference for very large numbers of people if we can take it to scale. The learning for me on this was in my first year at IRC last year, when we went through a strategy process and cash came screaming through as a vital response to the scale but also the changes in the humanitarian sector in two very, very interesting ways. First of all, perhaps surprisingly, when we were really rigorous about our emergency commitment and the way we wanted to change it, it transpired that when we looked, what do we want to do in the first 72 hours of a crisis? It wasn't just get water to people, it wasn't just get healthcare to people, it was get cash to people. And at the heart of IRC's new emergency plan, not just an expanded plan, but a changed plan, cash and cash distribution at scale and at decent cost, at an efficient cost, comes through very, very strongly indeed. So that was the first piece of learning. The second piece of learning is that in our longer term programs, the question, why not cash, the question that's asked in one of the first recommendations of the report, comes through very strongly indeed. And we want to be in a position where the first question we ask about programming is, why not cash? That doesn't mean cash will be the right answer in all settings, but it does need to mean that cash becomes a much more mainstream answer to the problems that the international community faces, the humanitarian community faces. As I went through the report, two things I thought were really positive, really beneficial. And I think that they're significant, really. The first was the emphasis on preparedness. I was really pleased that this didn't come as recommendation number 12, but it was actually recommendation number 1, that figuring out how we can get the systems in place, not just the bureaucratic systems, but the security systems, the technological systems, how we prepare ourselves for distributing cash at scale in a secure and effective way, I think it's really positive that you've highlighted that. The second thing is the emphasis on public-private partnership, which can become a bit of a cliche, can become a bit of an add-on. Actually, in the report, it comes through as a really positive, idea and a positive principle. And speaking neither from the public sector nor from the private sector, but from the NGO sector, I hope we can have an expansive definition of public. Maybe it's public interest, private interest partnership. Too many P's probably, but anyway, you get the point, that engaging the motivations and the intentions of the private sector is really important in this. If I can pick out two areas where I would have liked to have seen more in the report, where I hope we can focus discussion in the future, they would be the following. One, it is easy, I think, to nod along to and support. The other one is much tougher. The one that I think is important and easy is that we've got to yes, applaud the amount of evidence that exists for the benefits of cash transfers. I mean, IRC has led the way in many ways in some of the recent research in Lebanon, where the breadth of benefit from cash distribution came through very strongly. The $2.13 of local economic activity, never mind the improved, it seems, social relations in families and communities. But I don't think we can be complacent. We've got to continue to strengthen the evidence base and make sure that we get into the real detail of what works in different settings and different sectors and reaching different people. The second thing where I think we need more work, and where I hope your meeting today will do more thinking, is how do we stop telling each other how marvelous cash transfers are and actually make it a more fundamental principle of the humanitarian sector. My thought for the table is that we need some much tougher targets from donors about the amount of money they're going to distribute, what percentage of money they're going to distribute through cash transfers in the humanitarian sector. I don't see another way of creating the market for the private sector, of driving policy. But we really need of us, those who are the converted amongst this, need to really figure out what's going to drive the system. And I don't think we've got that in the report yet, and we need some really hard dialogue between ourselves and with policymakers to get that done. Let me just finish up with the following thought, which is why is this a timely moment as well as an excellent moment? The answer, I think, lies in the discussion about sustainable development goals, but not for the obvious reason. The obvious thing to say would be the SDGs are marvelous and cash transfers are going to ride the crest of the SDG wave. I want to make a slightly different point to you, which is that yes, the SDGs are inspiring, but there is a real danger that they miss out people in the toughest circumstances who are not a small minority of the globally displaced, but a large and significant proportion of those in humanitarian need. 43% of those in extreme poverty are now living in crisis places, in fragile states. And the great danger of the SDGs is that they exacerbate or widen the inequality between those who are poor in stable states and those who are poor in unstable, fragile, conflict-ridden places. And it seems to me that there aren't yet great answers about how the SDGs are going to be implemented in the toughest places. You can see that struggle in the fact that the World Humanitarian Summit is really a separate exercise from the SDGs. And what we need to do is turn the World Humanitarian Summit into an implementation exercise for the SDGs in the toughest places. And it's in that context that I think we could really use cash distribution as a game changer, as a way of really answering the hard questions that are posed by the ambitious proposals in the SDGs. So I hope that over the next 6 months and beyond, we can work not just as a group of people who are doing some interesting work together, but as a coalition for action. That's certainly my intention. That was the reason why I wanted to be part of your meeting today and why I wanted to record this video. So I look forward to a report on what answers you come up with, and I hope you can help all of us make some real gains for the people that we care about. Thank you very much.